Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. That's a quote that's from a poem. That poem's mounted on a plaque inside the Statue of Liberty, and that kind of sums up a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to try to take an unbiased, fact-based approach to the hot topic, the burning fire of immigration. So why don't you join me? I think you're going to like this. Hey guys, it's Joe here with the Practical Prepper Podcast, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about some of the news I've been reading, some of the research I've done in response to that, and I really just want to share some of that with you. There's a take, I think the big thing in the news this week has been some of the mass murders that have happened most frequently last weekend, and the impact they've had. I think we're really seeing the kind of epicenter or the combination of this whole dialogue around guns, and that's not what I'm getting into today. We'll talk about guns up and down. In fact, I've got another podcast coming up on that in a few. But I am an avid gun user. I'm not going to get into that topic today. Really, the topic today I want to get into is on kind of the head of where this immigration thing is, and more importantly, I'm going to take a nonpartisan stab at trying to break down some of the facts. I'm not going to tell you which way to lean. That's not where I'm going here. I am, however, going to try to stir the pot a little bit and get you to tell me your feelings. I think getting some dialogue on this is pretty imperative. And I'm going to take it from my standpoint as someone who is a student of history, and I want to break down some of the information that I have for you. And I hope it's interesting. I hope it's entertaining. And I do hope it drives just a little bit of thought or conversation. If nothing else, it is such a hot topic right now. Having a few facts to walk into a conversation the next time somebody spurts off one way or the other way will help drive the conversation in what is hopefully productive. It's America. That's where we're at. We get to stay in a place where we get to say whatever the hell we want without any consequences from the government. So whether you believe that wholeheartedly or don't, that's the take we're going to take on it today. So I want to start first with that kind of intro, and then I want to lead into some of the history pieces that I wanted to talk about. And let me start with, we talk about refugees. Refugees is kind of an interesting topic. I don't really understand what it means precisely yet. I know that the law says that it is someone who has a fear of some sort of punishment that is not earned on their part, right? So basically, they're not trying to run away from a crime. They are in fear for their life, and the way that they're going to try to preserve their life is to go somewhere else. That's how I break it down in my mind. So I want to talk about one refugee that I did a little bit of thinking on, or as I started to look through, man, who are people who would resemble refugees coming through today? And I don't mean physically resemble refugees. Refugees have been in existence as long as time has been in existence. People running away from one group that doesn't like them, trying to find another group that will take them in so that they can prosper. That has been, we've seen that from biblical times. We've seen it, I'm sure, way before that, and it continues today. But I thought a little background on a couple folks. I picked one person here today who is, in my mind, pretty impactful to how the world works today, and so I wanted to understand kind of, all right, so where's this guy? Where's this guy come from, and why did he get to become who he was? Why is he important to America? Why is he important to the world? And for me, I think about a guy and his wife on a boat in 1933 in March, sailing across from the United States back to Europe. It was over here on a short-term visa and headed back to Europe. He's on the boat and he realizes this chancellor in Germany guy is no joke, and he is currently going to do some bad things to anybody who's Jewish, and I happen to be Jewish. So he decides Germany may not be the best place to go to, takes a little time, and instead detours, heads to the UK, and has some connections there from his time teaching, spends a little bit of time there, and starts to get a better grasp on exactly what's happening in the world here in 33. And after working to try to get citizenship in the UK and stay, remember, we understand what's happening in Germany right now, right? They are going to start literally boxing up Jews and killing them. That is what this guy is running from. There's no joke here. This is a true and imminent threat. And he knows that, and he sees that this stuff is starting to come to fruition. But it starts with just simply pushing out all Jewish professors, taking their names off all of the schools, and then starting to manage what teachings are out there. This guy's stuff that he wrote as a professor is now literally being burned by the Nazi Party. His name is going on a list. That list is publicized. A bounty is now on his head, $5,000. And next to his head, it says, "Not yet hanged." So I think we can all kind of agree this guy's got a certain situation where he shouldn't go back to where he's from. The UK is still like, nah, not gonna be a citizen here. He's Jewish. He writes to Palestine. He's like, hey, can I come there? And they're like, no, we're not doing that. Ends up taking a job teaching in New Jersey. I'm talking about Albert Einstein, right? So he moves to New Jersey and starts teaching, gets tied up in a little project, not in Manhattan, but aptly named so, that is going to change things a little bit. We can fast forward. The world hits a storm. Things don't go well. All of a sudden, multiple nations, the whole world's at war. World War II, right? As part of that, we've got to find a way to end it, and things have been escalating. And so we can fast forward to August 6th. This is August 6th of 45, and there's a plane that takes off somewhere in the middle of the Pacific, and it flies about 6 hours. It's safely sitting over Japan at this point, and it finds a mark. So Enola Gay, the initial Boeing B-29 Superfortress, is taken off. It's hovering over. It drops a payload that drops for 43 seconds and detonates 16 kilotons equivalent of TNT over Nagasaki here, or I'm sorry, Hiroshima for the first one of the six. So this is something that war has never seen before. It is something that kills 80,000 people almost instantly, takes out 60% of an entire city in a flash, literally in a flash. All that being said, 3 days later, the 9th, we drop another one of these things. But the day before that, on the 8th, Russia decides to get in the game. They declare war against Japan. Now Japan's kind of like, all right, Russia's coming. The U.S. has already dropped a big bomb. The 9th hits. We drop another one. And by the 10th, they surrender. It was the fastest way and probably the most devastating way to have to end a war. If Einstein hadn't picked the U.S., if he didn't want to be a citizen here, if he didn't want to stay here, and in not exactly in his words, but to paraphrase what he said, the American meritocracy, the ability to be able to say what you want, think what you want, and be able to grow on your own merits, to become something that you want to be. If you work hard enough, it will get better. To do that is something that he, even after living in Belgium and living in Germany and living in the UK and you guys lived everywhere, right? He still appreciates and loves. That's why he became a citizen of the United States. That's why he helped us end a global war, because it had to be done. And I always think about, what if this refugee, this someone fleeing for their lives, now he's a pretty well-educated guy, he's also a pretty well-known person, so that makes him a little bit of a different case. What if the United States was like, man, we're just not taking refugees right now, we're kind of stacked. And but it makes you wonder what kind of brain power is showing up. I don't care what border it's at. I don't care what country it's coming from. But are we currently have some of the greatest minds that may want to come here and may want to help us end wars, that may want to help us develop new theories, that may want to help us create new types of diplomacy, the things that Einstein did in his writings, The Turkey, and how many lives he saved and how many scientists he got out. He saved over 1,000 lives of scientists, finding them additional areas to refuge to. So there's a lot of things that I think I need to kind of comprehend inside my head as to what is the topic of immigration and what type of people are there. But let's say you're not a wealthy immigrant. You are a poor immigrant. You're someone that doesn't have a whole lot of anything. And I think that's where I wanted to go next. So I'm looking through history stuff, and I see a guy who's Hungarian, who is completely, I mean, his parents are bankrupt. He's got nothing. He is trying to find a way to make a life for himself. So lucky for him, he's in Hungary. Lucky for him, the United States decides that they are going to throw down against the United States. And this is the American Civil War. This is the bloodiest war that's ever happened on American soil or for America. Altogether, there are a lot of people who are now going to be conscripted. And he finds a way to take one of their spots. There were actually families that would hire recruiters to go to other countries and to recruit people to come, and they would pay them. I'll pay your family. You come fight in the Civil War, and then my son doesn't have to. And so he got one of those tickets, came over. He's 17 years old, and he comes to fight. A Hungarian kid comes to fight in the Civil War. Well, he speaks a couple languages, one of German. He speaks German, French, Hungarian, and he gets put into a German unit, and he fights for the North, and North is victorious. Spoiler alert. They and afterward, he's got to find a job, and he's takes a job as a whaler on a boat in Boston, and just crap jobs, just tossed out at sea. Eventually, he's like, we got to find something else. Hitchhikes his way on a train all the way to Missouri, and becomes basically a mule handler for a little while, becomes a waiter, starts networking a little bit better, and then eventually starts to find that there are some people who are willing to help him out and help him learn a little bit. So he ends up getting a job at the railroad, figures out how to work his way up, and through that time works his way up and starts to get into newspapers. He wrote an article about himself. Wrote an article about hopping on a steamboat. You pay a guy a couple bucks, he takes you down to a plantation in Louisiana, and you got a great life. You're picking cotton. It's great. Well, the guys took his $5 for the ride down Louisiana, took him about 30 miles south of Missouri, and ditched him on the side of the river and made him walk back. He writes an article. It gets published, and he gets a little taste of it, and he starts doing that on the side while he's working for the railroad, and eventually starts to publish a little bit more. So he's only 22, came to the country when he was 17. He's 22 years old now, and has joined the Republican Party. He's doing a networking thing, and finds out that they need a candidate to run for the state Senate. They nominate him. He goes, he gets it. You got to be 25, by the way, to run for the state Senate in Jefferson City in Missouri, in the state of Missouri. But he's 22, and everybody's kind of like, well, that's fine. We're just going to let it roll. So he does that for a little bit, and then now he's able to work his way into getting better roles. Starts working at a newspaper, ends up merging two newspapers together as his career grows, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Eventually leverages that. So it's about leveraging, right? Work your tail off, leverage. Work your tail off, leverage. He leverages that. He buys the New York Post. Yeah, this is Joseph Pulitzer. He works his tail off, Some people give him a little crap because he got a little what they call yellow journalism, a little salacious stuff, right? But he knew what people wanted to hear. He knew what sold. He was really good at marketing. He was really good at business, and he went from nothing to taking a spot to where he should have died for someone else in a country that he didn't speak the language, and just ground it out. He just had pure grit. When we talk about immigrants coming to the United States, we talk about people, we say, oh, they're going to take our jobs. Yeah, he took a job. He took a job of a guy that was going to war to die, probably. Who else in the United States was going to take that job? There's a reason they had to go to Hungary to go get it filled, right? It wasn't like there was a line of people going, all right, I'll take that job. There was nobody that wanted that job. Then cleaning up after mules that are parked at a stable, there weren't a lot of people that wanted that job, but he needed a job, right? Who's going to put you on a boat, and I'm going to go have you maybe catch some whales, maybe fall overboard, probably freeze your tail off. It's Boston. Nobody wanted that job. These are people who will take jobs and make them their own and do the best they can at them and leverage them and get another job, a better job, and better job. And yeah, you know what? Eventually, yes, he's running a newspaper. He made the company to kind of do it, right? He bought it, he acquired it, he made it happen. He took a really good job from somebody else eventually, but he busted his tail to get there. And I think history shows he was probably the better guy to get that job anyways. Eventually, he amassed some good cash. He donated some money to Columbia University, and I've stood there at the School of Journalism in New York at Columbia, and that's where they issue the Pulitzer Prize every year for the awards in literature, all named after a guy who just took the job he could get, worked his tail off, traveled around the country to figure it out. I think that's kind of a cool one. I didn't really think of what kind of jobs they were taking until I started running down the crap list of jobs that Pulitzer did to be able to figure out how to make it here. But it wasn't only immigrants. There are sons of immigrants. Now, I will say, and I got just two more I'm going to hit on. But, this one is a family from Scotland, right? So we've got a couple here so far. We got a Hungarian one. We'll do Scotland here. Okay, so is Scotland the place that you're going to run from? Maybe not. In 1848, there was a little bit of a food problem they might call famine that was happening in Scotland. And this guy's dad happened to make clothing materials. He was a weaver. And all of a sudden, that wasn't the biggest thing that everybody wanted. So he's a little bankrupt. Moves to the United States, gets a job making $2 an hour. Yes, if you adjust that for inflation, that's $56 a week. I'm sorry, he was making $2 a week. $56 a week in today's dollars is what he was making. Now, today's Manhattan prices were not the same if you wanted to live there as they were in 1848, but get beyond the point. So this guy, he moves, goes through Ellis Island, ends up in Pittsburgh, and is now working at a cotton factory, changing the bobbins of thread as they weave things, making $2.50 an hour. Keeps working through it. Meets a guy named Colonel James Anderson, and this guy changed his life. This guy had 400 books in his little library at his house. And today, we don't think 400 books is a lot because we've all walked into giant libraries. But to this guy, it was everything. He read every book. And this gentleman would open up his home on Saturdays to any of the kids who were working in the factories to come and read books. And they could come sit and they could read, and they thought it was the coolest thing ever. And that's what they did. He came and he read everything the guy had. And he said at one point, if ever wealth come to me, I would set to it that other poor boys might receive opportunities similar to those for which we were indebted to this noble man. So he thought of him as a noble man who's willing to open up his home and give him a little bit. And he felt that feeling of indebtedness. Somebody gave me a shot at it. I'm not even from this country, but somebody gave me here in America a shot at being something. And I took it and I worked it. I worked everything I could. I worked at my job all day, made crap money, and then I went home and made my life better. So we did that. By the time he's 18, he gets a job, shuffling papers at a telegraph office. He's got one of those minds that just kind of works, and he then just kind of learns Morse code. He could learn Morse code. He could translate Morse code on the fly without writing it down. He could just speak Morse code legitimately. And eventually they make him an operator. Like, well, I can't have this guy not be an operator. And he's making a little more cash. Eventually translates that over to railroad companies, which, for those of you that probably already know this, railroad companies at that time had telegraph lines that ran down the side of them. So every railroad station had a telegraph office, and that's where he worked. He was doing Morse code at a train station, basically, and eventually works his way up to being able to get people to manage. He becomes a manager, parlays that up forward. Eventually, he becomes the superintendent of the Western Divide for the Pennsylvania Railroad. Now he's making what he thinks is hard cash in 59 here, back in 1859. So he's got, making today's equivalent of about 42 grand, which was pretty high in the hog at that time. He is also kind of spending a little bit of that cash, but he makes some investments. He does pretty well for himself, makes some good friends. Civil War hits, and he's now the superintendent of military railways. So this guy is managing all the movements of munitions and men for the Union during the Civil War. When we think about the deciding factors and historians debate, why did the Union win the Civil War? Part of the reason that the Union won the Civil War was because of the railway systems, because of the unified track gauge. We could run the trains all the way from one end to the other because we had track that was exactly the same size, and they did not have that always in the South. There were different sized train and tracks. So we were able to leverage that. This guy was in charge of that. This guy was the guy that did that, and he really made it all happen. You see the kind of railway piece growing, and rails were dependent upon steel, were dependent upon bridges. And that's where this guy, Andrew Carnegie, started to invest his cash, bought a factory in Pennsylvania, invented the Bessemer process for hardening or getting the pig iron out of the steel and stuff and making it really hard. We wouldn't have skyscrapers if we didn't have this guy's intuition and his grit at driving this stuff forward. I mean, imagine how much land an apartment would cost in New York City if you couldn't build taller than 3 stories, right? I mean, it's pretty ridiculous right now. So Andrew Carnegie decides he's going to retire. He's got a call on a friend of his, JP Morgan, and he's like, JP, I've got this steel business. I'd like to retire. And JP's like, I got a great idea. I'm going to take that. I'm going to wrap it up with some other adjacent businesses. I'm going to vertically integrate this thing. You go ahead and exit. I pay you handsomely. And then I'm going to go create the U.S. Steel Corporation, which at that point then becomes 4% of the national wealth of the United States of America. This is not a small venture. But Andrew Carnegie, right, our Scottish friend, is now going to honor the quote that we said. He's going to give back. He goes and starts building libraries everywhere, right? I mean, think about how many cities have a library. And then you got things like Carnegie Mellon and things like that are other offshoots of things that he's done. Carnegie Hall in New York, where he's honoring music. We've got Carnegie grants. He put like 4,000 pianos around at schools around the, I don't know, it was 40,000. It's ridiculous. So all these things are because of a guy who's an immigrant who came here, who wanted to make a little bit of a difference and worked his way up through grit. He's moving thread on bobbins for 12 hours a day for the equivalent of today's $56 a week. I mean, who wants that job? Who do you know in the United States is going to take $56 a week to go do a job? I don't know the person. You can't find it in America. We're too entitled. You got to find it somewhere else. Somebody who's not entitled. Somebody who has grit. And I think from my perspective, again, I just want to raise up the idea that I don't think these people are after our blue-collar accounting jobs, or I don't think they're after our teaching jobs. I don't think they're after any of those jobs. I think they really just want a chance not to die and maybe a chance to have a house. So from where I'm going, I got people like Andrew Carnegie who built the Tuskegee Institute, a college just to try to help people of color try to advance a little bit. But he earned his money. He can do whatever the heck he wants. And he spent like all of it. He did not die. He died a wealthy man, but upon his death, it went to so many places, and so many great places were helped out. I wanted to just mention that one. I got a last one here that I'll drop into, And when I think of Siberia, I think of a place where prisoners are sent to, not a place where I would want to live. So when this next guy, it's 1893, almost turn of the century, he moves 5 years old to New York City from Siberia, and his only memory before he was 5 that he ever recalls is sitting on a blanket, watching his house burn down, and he is then in abject poverty, and all of the things they're able to salvage of the house is all they have left to buy a ticket to get out of Dodge. So they come into Ellis Island, and this story may resonate. He gets put in a pen with his brother, his 5 sisters, in Ellis Island until they're deemed fit to enter the United States. At that time, we were a little harder up for some manual labor, and we had a lot of those jobs. We haven't outsourced a lot of the jobs that we have today. So they were looking for a lot of strong backs and folks that could help out. And he came United States, got into and became a newspaper boy. He was a newsie in the late 1800s in New York City. And eventually, when he turned 14, just left home, lived in homeless shelters, basically, and started trying to sing on the street for music. I mentioned this one because I just think about the impact of music that people have too, and I've done a lot of business stuff, and I wanted to take something that wasn't so businessy. But this is Irving Berlin. Irving Berlin wrote most of the ragtime music that you can think of. He wrote things like White Christmas, some of the classics that we can think about. And he didn't speak English. He came here at 5 years old. He didn't speak a whole lot. He was 5. But came here and just ground it out. He literally lived in orphanages, selling newspapers and singing for a supper until a group of these kids were good enough and found each other and got a gig doing a little bit of singing, literally singing for your supper at some restaurants in New York City. And they would just work on tips and whatnot, and eventually taught himself to play piano after hours with the house pianist, and moved that into being able to write music and read music. And the song that he released that is the most impactful to me is one he released in 1938. And he had to come up with a song. He wrote it 15 years prior, I think, something like that. But it was a song that he released in 38. You gotta remember where the world's at in 38, right? It's the 20th anniversary of World War I armistice, right? The end of World War I. And we need a song to celebrate that. We don't know, but in a few short moments, the United States is going to see on the rise a new war coming. We've already kind of hit on that. And eventually that the songs that he's putting out will become the epic songs that we know today. So he writes God Bless America. So God Bless America is written by a guy from Siberia. Yeah, check yourself there for a minute. So you've got a Russian who has written God Bless America, and I think of, and there's a video out there, and if you haven't seen it, go see it. If you weren't alive when 9/11 happened, this is one of those moments. Go spend 5 minutes and just go look it up. But when 9/11 hit, and it's September 11th, and there was a press conference, and it was on the steps of the Congress, and the members of the Senate were there, members of the House were there. They were all releasing as a bipartisan statement. House Majority Leaders there, they're releasing a statement basically saying we're going to be at work tomorrow, and we are not going to let this disrupt our lives. We're going to move forward. And as they start to walk off, and you could tell like the speech is done organically out of nowhere, the bipartisan Senate, Republicans, Democrats, are on the steps of the Capitol, start singing God Bless America. And it's one of those, if you don't remember it, look it up, but it's one of those moments where you're just like, when times are tough, we as a nation bond together like no other. And music is one of those things that bonds us together. And as I stretch about and I think about God Bless America, I think about Land That I Love, right? Just like there there are people trying to get here, the Irving Berlins of the world, who are 5 years old, who are going to be separated from their family, who are going to figure out are or are not going to be bad for America. And then they're going to come and they're going to do things that nobody wants to do. They're going to earn their living, and they're going to be some of the deepest rooted Americans that are out there. I think of even my father-in-law, who is a Greece immigrant, who came here when he was just a few years old himself, about the same age as Irving Berlin, and his work and just waiting tables, bartending, getting it bought into a restaurant, owning a restaurant, and eventually owning one of the oldest restaurants in town, and how you have to work your tail off, and how hard immigrants work to provide for their families is really inspirational to me. I really think about that, and that hits home as we did a little bit of the research and the history there. And I had to bring that forward then and ask myself, okay, great. So what does that all mean in the context of today's climate and everything that's happening? So we've got a lot of these business owners, right, that are out there. 40% of all the Fortune 500 businesses today are owned and ran by immigrants or by children of immigrants. That makes up an amazing amount of the wealth of our country today. It's not to say that people who are born here or second or third or fourth generation can't come up with the same thing, but you're talking about a very small slice of people who just moved here or have been here one generation that comprise 40% of all of the major revenue driving companies in the United States. That one kind of hit me a little bit, understanding what do you give up as far as from a business standpoint, from an economic standpoint, as far as wealth of a nation, if you don't figure out how to leverage the grit that is available to you and use that as a multiplier to really make more money for a nation, right? There are ideas, there are different ways of thinking about things that only come if you have different experiences. I found that to be true in a lot of things that I look at. So it's not just about people that are coming here for asylum, but asylum is a piece of it. And I'm thinking to myself, all right, we've got these shootings. We've got this guy who thinks, Mexicans are bad, and he's shooting up a Walmart. And what does he base this stuff on? So I gotta go find some facts, because I'm kind of ignorant. I don't live in El Paso. I don't know what's happening in that city. But so I looked it up a little bit. So this year, there are 363,300 people. So that's a little over 363,000 people. Make sure I got that one right. 363,000 people that have applied for asylum. And what the new laws on the books are, hey, look, this administration, and I'm not picking on an administration, right? That's not what today's about. Today's really about, let's just discuss some things. But the administration today, I think in a savvy business play, but from a humanitarian side, I'm not sure I'm with it, is saying, hey, look, if you left El Salvador and you needed to get to the United States, you crossed through Guatemala and Mexico to get here. Couldn't you have stopped at one of those places? Did you have to come all the way here? And I don't know the answer to that. I don't understand. I'm not someone seeking asylum. I don't get what goes through their head. But I do remember from my time in New York looking at the Statue of Liberty, where we're just saying, give me your meat, give me your poor. And I know that is something that resonates globally with people. It's a statue we put right in the harbor of our biggest city, and we call to them to come here, and they come here, and we're kind of like, well, couldn't you stop somewhere else? One option would be we could gift the Statue of Liberty to Mexico. That would be one way around it, and then maybe people would see that, and they might stop there. I don't know if that's going to work, but I'm going to throw that out there as a possible solution. I hate to only point out problems and no solutions. So, but we could think about, of the people who came and applied for asylum, of the 363,000 people that applied for asylum that came in to the United States this year, of those, 3,200 were Mexican. That's less than a percentage point. That's less than less than 1%, were Mexicans. There's only 3,200 Mexicans that applied for asylum this year, because there are still places that are pretty decent in Mexico. There are some places you would not pay me to go to in Mexico. There are places that the State Department will not let American employees of the United States government travel to. Yeah, I did read an article about one of the things they're doing now is they're saying, all right, great, you can have asylum, but you can't come in yet. You got to stay on the other side of the wall, but we'll give you a free bus pass, and that bus pass will take you to a city that is on the State Department's do not travel list. You're not allowed to go there on state money because it's too dangerous. And I get you're Guatemalan, and I get you're not from there, but we will take you there, and we will drop you off in the street, literally, and then we'll see you in a few months. We'll expedite your hearing. Hope you make it. And there's a piece of it that kind of, I look at it and go, all right, interesting tactic. If we start to scare people into, if you don't stop in the nice places of Mexico, then when you get here, we're going to turn around and take you to the bad places of Mexico. As a parent, I get giving them a incentive, an economic incentive, and I'm not talking money economics. I'm talking ways of persuading people to change behaviors. You give them an incentive to not come here, because if you come to the United States, I will take you to the worst part of Mexico and drop you off. Now, mind you, I'm talking about 20 people. That's the only people that it's happened to. They happen to be Guatemalan and Honduran. But that's the path that we're at right now is, hey, why don't we just take these guys and we're going to dissuade you in this way. I think it could work. I think you're going to have some blood on your hands along the way. But as America, that's kind of been our thing too, is if we think that something is going to work long term, we're also willing to put people at harm, especially when they're not our people, to accomplish what we think is better for the many. I just can't figure out if it is better for the many. And I think that's the piece where I really wanted to bring home today, is I kind of need your help on the topic, because I am stuck. And when I think about 900,000 immigrants that are currently awaiting a court hearing that are in the United States, that's not even the ones that aren't in the United States, but I've got I got almost 1 million people sitting in the United States waiting on a court hearing. And those court hearings can take years. They can take from months if you've expedited it, you came in with children or something like that, to literally years. And what we're finding is that in the years, and I'll say you're saying 18 months, about 2.5 years, right? In that time frame, these people have to live. So they find a job. They are given a temporary working visa in order to live here without being on our subsistence. So they get a job. They, in many cases, have a kid, and that kid is a United States citizen born here in U.S. soil. They now are paying taxes because they've been given a tax identification number on their visa. They are, in some cases, it was like 6 or 7%, buying a home, taking out a mortgage, living the American dream, waiting for a day where the judge can tell them if they get to stay or not stay. And the answer is only 20% of them get to stay. So now we've got some issues with, now we've got to deport a tax-paying person that has a job, that is a person who is working, who is paying taxes. There are many Americans right now that don't pay taxes. They just take taxes in the form of government handouts, where these people came to the United States and started paying taxes almost immediately. And they not only did that, they worked their way into being able to buy a house. They are now trying to raise children here who are American children. And those are the people that we're willing to get rid of. Maybe we need to take an introspective look at who are all the people, and I don't want this to be a race issue. I want it to be an issue about grit, right? About who are the people out there today who are not paying taxes, who are living at a level in which they don't need to pay taxes, who are not contributing by buying a home, who are a long-term dependent on any kind of government handout. I've been on government assistance for a short period of time. It was a time where we if our family lost a job, we just needed some extra food, and that was it. And it lasted only a few months until we got another job. but that's kind of what the program was there for, is you just got kicked on your tail. Let's pick you up for a minute, dust you off, and now get back to it. That's kind of what happened with our family. We were fine, but it was great that was there for a minute, but I only needed it for a couple months, and we made it work. So I get the need for it. I've been there. I get the need to get off of it because, God, I didn't want to live on that. We don't want to live on that. That's not the way we wanted to live. This is America. We can do better than this. So that's where I guess I'm encouraging the conversation is let's understand that a few things. Let's understand that Mexicans are not coming over in droves. That's just not a fact. I mean, we're talking 3,200 of them. That's not that many when you think that there'll be probably about 1 million immigrants that will come in the United States. Of all of them, Guatemala, Hondurans, Salvadorians make up the lion's share of them. That's where you're going to find most of the folks that that are out there that need assistance today. So if you're looking kind of for a idea or understanding, the rest of them are coming. Actually, believe it or not, from Cuba. Africa, those still make up. Brazil is like twice as many immigrants coming to the United States from Brazil as there are from Mexico right now. So there's a finger pointed. Let's put a wall here. I get why the wall's going here because that is the concentration. The largest child detention camps in the United States are in Texas and New York, which is kind of weird to me. Which is where some of these kids are being detained. And there's not a ton of the kids. I think that's kind of overplayed in the media that, there's a ton of kids that are out there today that are in detentions. I think there's only about 150 that are there from the research that I could find today. And that's looking at some pretty liberal sites. So I have to kind of gauge those numbers to be on the higher side. But I would say that total this year, it looks like there was probably about 2,500 total children that were separated from their families. About 20% of those decided that we're not going to try to reunite with our family, so let us out into the United States, and you can send our parents back. So there's a lot of people who decided to do that. Not sure I understand how that works when they get over here. Maybe they have family they can meet with here. That's cool if that's the case. But in about a fifth of the time, they're going, yeah, we don't need to be here anymore. Let us out. There's laws in the books that say you can only hold a minor for 20 days, which is kind of weird because some of these kids are in there over a year. But extenuating circumstances with the courts and having enough judges to get through this stuff, I guess there's ways around some of those laws. But all in all, I wanted just to take a different thought process or understanding. I wanted to give you guys a couple facts. I wanted to talk about the impact that immigrants have had in the United States, why I am proud to be a son of immigrants, why I am proud of our history of opening and accepting people. So I'm not an anti-immigration guy, but I am a little bit of an anti-illegal immigration guy. I think, however, if your choice is take the refugee path, and we'll take you to Tijuana where we won't even let our government officials go. Or my opportunity is try to sneak under the cover of darkness, hope I'm a good swimmer. Then I think, given that situation, I'm looking at it from a different lens. I might have to think about it in a different way. I'm already over here. I'm already an American. My grandparents made sure of that. But there are many people, and you may be one of them, who might be a little closer to that line where it wasn't your grandparents, it was your parents, or it was you, and you may have a different take on it. I'd love to hear that. I really would love to get some more influence on this topic and conversation. My Facebook group, or the Facebook group that we run at the National Self-Reliance Initiative, is really the best place to do that. It's a closed group, so we can have a pretty open conversation. And I encourage you to go to NSRI USA on Facebook, find the group, ask, I'll let you in. We just make it a group so we can kick out people who are being crazy or unruly. But otherwise, everybody's in. And come talk about it and help me out on my decision. And I appreciate you guys listening in. I appreciate your time. And really, really let us know if you. I've got some more of these coming. This one is a show where it's just me. We're going to do a lot of these. They're going to be interview based, and I hope We've got some great ones coming up for you in the pipeline. They're going to be pretty cool, pretty unique people who I don't always get. I'm not an expert in these things, and I've been pretty lucky to get a couple of them on board. So looking forward to talking to you again soon, and please reach out and let me know your thoughts.